The big collapse in bonds is here. America is printing its way to destruction, going the way of the Greeks. The crisis is not coming, it's here. So tell me, do you agree with those statements? Disagree? Maybe some of you have no idea what I just said. How about this? Quote, I believe we are seeing the very early stages of a great monetary crisis that will, eventually, lead people and their politicians to return to the gold and silver-backed currencies. End quote. Do you believe that to be true? I was going through my stepmother's papers. She passed away in 2012, and I found in her files from December 2010 the Stansberry's Investment Advisory. This is Porter Stansberry, who's, a very well-known investment newsletter guy, and someone that she apparently listened to. And I kind of chuckled at this December 2010 newsletter that predicted that the big collapse in bonds is here and that rates were going to soar. Oops, I guess they missed that one by just a little bit. By the way, in fairness, I probably would have agreed with this had I read it in December of 2010. So I'll be the first to acknowledge that I am no better at predicting the future than this newsletter was here about 5 years ago. But as I read through it, it really underscored for me the dangers of not just trying to predict future financial markets, but more importantly, making investment decisions based on those predictions. I make predictions all the time. I just don't make investment decisions based on my predictions because I know from history that my track record is terrible. So going through this newsletter, it was interesting. Let me read you this. Despite the enormous buying of treasuries by the Fed, long-term treasury bond rates have soared on these announcements. Investors have begun to flee the U.S. dollar into all other forms of saving. Coal and oil are trading at 2-year highs. Corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, and sugar are trading at multi-year highs. Gold and copper are trading at record highs. Silver is trading at a 30-year high. Well, all of that, of course, has changed dramatically since December of 2010. All of those things are trading at lows. Well, not gold and silver, although they've fallen significantly. Oil, of course, is at about $40 a barrel as I record this podcast in November 2015. And so what looked like certainty in 2010, sure, we're going to have terrible inflation. The government's printing money. And all of these hard assets, these commodities, priced in U.S. dollars for the most part, are going to go up. That's what's going to happen. And of course, as we know, that's not at all what happened. The newsletter goes on. It says, U.S. credit is now in permanent decline, while the value of the main alternatives to the dollar, energy, food, and real money, are soaring. Of course, that all reversed. The market is giving you a warning. Inflation is here. Well, turns out it's not. We're in the midst of a monetary crisis. Well, turns out we weren't. The facts are undeniable. Well, it turns out they were. What's the single best way to protect yourself? Here we go. Rates on 10-year government bonds have nearly doubled since last year. Again, this was written in 2010. I expect this trend toward higher rates to continue for a long, long time. But I guess Porter Stansberry and I were both wrong. This trend toward higher interest rates in the United States is the single most important trend in finance. The great bull market in paper money, central banking, and the faith and credit of the United States is over. After all, our leaders have no faith, and we have no credit. Well, it turns out we do have credit. Interesting newsletter. I always like to go back in time. And in fact, I've got some things. I'm going to take you back to 1981 later in this podcast. But one of the things that I found kind of interesting was in a headline in this newsletter. It said, the time to act is now. And one of the things it said is, as you look through your portfolio, the first thing you ought to consider adding is silver. Well, I know silver has gone down, but exactly how bad is it? So I looked up the iShares Silver Trust, which basically tracks silver, to see how it did. Now, this newsletter, December 2010, right? So the end of 2010, and that year, silver was up big, 82% if you invested in the iShares Silver Trust. Recommending silver was certainly, you were going to get a lot of believers. It was up 47% in 2009, 82% in 2010. This newsletter, we're now at the end of 2010. Recommending silver, it's a sure bet, right? Well, down almost 11% in 2011, back up 9% in 12, down 36% in 13, by the way, when the S&P 500 was up 32%, down 20% in 2014, and down almost 2% year to date in 2015. I'm not really picking on Porter Stansberry. I just found this newsletter in my stepmother's files. And as I said, I'm as bad at predicting future markets as this newsletter turned out to be, at least this version of it in December 2010. By the way, it includes a whole laundry list of recommendations, both to short certain stocks like Pulte Group, a home builder. They said to short that. Now, in 2011, it was down 16%, so maybe shorting it may have made you some money, although it was up 187% in 2012. In any event, I went through all of the stock recommendations, and most of them turned out not to be such great deals if you followed the recommendations, including one company that went bankrupt or is on the verge of bankruptcy. Again, not really wanting to pick on someone's bad predictions in December 2010. Mine would have been just as bad. The real question is, do you make investing decisions on those predictions? And again, these aren't predictions of fundamental analysis of a business, but rather of future directions of markets, whether it's interest rates or whatever, commodity prices. And it's something that I just think is not a long-term, doesn't give you a high likelihood of long-term investing success. So, if you predict and you make your investing decisions based on those predictions, be careful, because those folks that, do it full time do it poorly. So for those of us that, have regular jobs during the day and can only spend so much time on our investments, I think it's a fool's game to try to do it. So anyway, newsletter from December 2010. Again, I'm going to take you back to 1981 in a little bit. But first, I want to go to the main topic for today, and it comes from a reader who sent me an email, very short email actually, one-sentence email, one question from a reader named Dan. And he wrote in, he said, "Could you please suggest a couple of resources, i.e. websites, books, for getting out of debt?" And I thought that's a great question, and it ought to be a topic for a podcast. And so here we are. And it kind of brought me back to some conversations I've had with friends who are just starting out investing, folks in their 20s. And we'll sit down for coffee. This has happened a couple of times in the last few months. And, I don't know, these are individuals I've known for a while, but don't have any idea about their finances, their investment philosophy, if they have one, their level of experience. And so I'll just try to gauge, where they are in terms of investing knowledge. And I might ask them, so, do you have a 401k? I think some do, some don't. Do you know what it's invested in? Some know, some don't know. Or they'll tell me kind of it's in a target date fund. I'll ask them if they have an understanding of what that is. Sometimes they don't. They certainly don't know their expense ratio or what that means. And by the way, that was the question of the week. That's going to be part of this. I'll get to that at the end of the show. Had some great responses. I'll share a lot of them with you. They don't have that level of detail, which is fine. I certainly didn't have that level of detail, at that level of knowledge in my 20s. But once I get a kind of understanding of where they are, the first question, sort of substantive question about their finances that I ask them, really has nothing to do directly with investing. It's their debt. What's your debt situation? You can tell your debt gives a picture of kind of your history, your financial history. It can tell you a lot about a person. If they have school debt, obviously they went to school. If they've got a lot of consumer sort of credit card debt, it tells you something about their spending habits. Maybe they have medical debt, and maybe they've had a medical issue outside of their control, and it gives you a picture there. But it's usually the first substantive thing that I talk about and want to try to get an understanding of, even when the point of the meeting with my friends was to talk about investing, because it just tells you so much about their finances, about who they are. I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily. Again, I think, school debt can be a good thing. I certainly had school debt. Well, maybe saying it's a good thing goes a little too far, but it's certainly an understandable type of debt to incur. But it really gives you a picture into someone's finances and some of the things that they're going to need to do to get on the right track. So, talking about debt and talking about tools and resources you can use to help get out of debt, I think is a great topic. And Dan, I appreciate you raising it. So to kind of tackle it, rather than just sort of rattling off 10 resources, let me first put it all in sort of a framework. So for me, there's sort of four steps to getting out of debt. One is figuring out why you're in debt in the first place. And we'll come back to that. The second is getting rid of any debt that you can, like, for example, selling a car that you don't need. It's a step that I think a lot of, when you hear a lot of financial gurus, they skip over it. We shouldn't assume that the debt that we have is the debt we have to have. Now, in some cases it is. If your debt is on credit cards from vacations and eating out, you can't return that, obviously. But you may have some debt from things that you can return. So that's a question we shouldn't skip over. It may only take you a couple of minutes to evaluate it, but you shouldn't skip over it. Can you get rid of debt? 3, refinance the debt. You want to get the interest rates as low as possible. We'll talk about that. And then the fourth step then is to figure out what order you're going to pay your debt off and deciding, do I apply extra money to my debt or do I just make the minimum payment? And if I do apply extra money, which debt should I tackle first? So those are the 4 steps. Why are you in debt? Can you get rid of any debt? Can you refinance any debt? And then that plan of which debts are you going to tackle first with any extra money you decide to put towards that debt. So what I thought I'd do today is kind of give you some resources and thoughts and ideas in that order, and within those 4 sort of stages of analysis that I think folks should go through when they are trying to climb out of debt. So let's start with number 1, figuring out why you're in debt. This is important. The hardest part about getting out of debt is not actually, which debt should I pay off first or refinancing my debt to a lower rate. The hardest part of getting out of debt is not going into more debt. At least that was the hardest part for my wife and I. I think it's the hardest part just from folks that I talk to, particularly if the kind of debt you have is credit card debt. That sort of living a little bit outside, beyond your means, where maybe you don't go into big amounts of debt all at once, but it's $100 here, a few $100 there, and over time, all of a sudden you've got $5, $10, whatever, $20,000, maybe more in debt. Stopping that sort of lifestyle is, I think, the hardest thing. So step 1 has got to be, why are you in debt? Now, for some folks, they're in debt for reasons that are easy to identify and aren't because they're living beyond their means. So, for example, school loans is a perfect example. Some folks may be sitting on $40,000 of school loans. It's the only debt that they have. They don't live beyond their means month to month. And so this step 1 will be a very simple analysis. This is the kind of debt that's not going to repeat itself. It's not an ongoing issue that needs to be resolved. You went to college, you got a degree, you have X dollars in school loans, and frankly, you moved to step 2, pretty quickly. For others, this analysis is going to take some effort. It was typical for my wife and I. We had some school loans, we had some credit card debt, we had a home equity line of credit. Maybe we were typical. I don't know, but some of it, some of our debt was from school, but a lot of it was just from spending more money than we should. And I think that's where probably most people fit in. They've got a little bit of several different kinds of debt, some of which is living beyond their means. In our case, we probably paid, even though we financed cars, that's one issue. But even beyond that, we spent more on cars than we should have, for example. And that's probably, I think, pretty common. And so for that kind of situation, you really need to spend some time on this first step, figuring out, okay, well, let's look at the debt we've got. What got us into this problem, and how do we, putting aside all the things we're going to do to get out of that hole, how do we keep from digging the hole deeper? How do we keep ourselves from, going into more debt? And there I break it down into 2 things to think about. One is just basic budgeting. I know I'm not some people love to budget. I'm not one of them. But you've got to know where your money's going. You've got to be able to make decisions during the month so that you don't go into more debt that month. That's one of the things about budgeting. You've got to budget in a way that allows you to make mid-course corrections so that you can see your money as you're going through the month. You don't want to get to the end of the month and then download all your transactions and realize you spent $400 more than you made. At that point, it might help you, I guess, going forward, but it's kind of information that comes a little too late to make decisions during the month. So in terms of resources, let me give you a couple. My favorite just budgeting app is YNAB. You need a budget. I've mentioned it before. There is a fee for it. You can try it out for 34 days, I believe, is their trial period. But to me, it's just if you're all you're looking for is budgeting tool. I've used Quicken, I've used Mint, I've used a spreadsheet. To me, YNAB is the absolute best. You need a budget is what that stands for, and it does take some time to learn it. I mean, it's not that complicated, but it does take some time to understand how YNAB works. The good news is the website, which, by the way, is even if you don't buy YNAB, the website itself is the second resource I want to mention. Phenomenal forum on budgeting, phenomenal video tutorials and other information. So that even if you use a spreadsheet or Mint or whatever, the YNAB site itself, excellent resource on budgeting. But if you're going to use a tool, I highly recommend YNAB. It's what I use. The other thing I like about it is it doesn't actually connect automatically to your bank accounts. One of the news items we're going to talk about today is that very issue, how some banks are shutting down the connection between the bank and the mint.coms of the world. But some folks, even apart from that issue, just don't want to give out their username and password. With YNAB, the way it works is you log into your bank, you download your transactions and upload them into YNAB. It's an extra step, but it really doesn't take very long. I do that with our bank accounts, but both checking and savings. I also do it with our credit card accounts. I can download the credit card transactions, upload them into YNAB. It takes a few minutes, so very easy to do. So YNAB is my first suggestion. Even if you don't use it, the YNAB website, excellent. Of course, there are others. I mentioned mint.com. I've used that in the past. I don't use it now. I think it's a very good tool. It's free. You could always go with Quicken. I'm not a fan of Quicken for the Mac. I have an Apple. I don't really care for Quicken for the Mac. Quicken for PC is much more robust. Always frustrates me. They don't just make the application the same for both. Maybe it's more complicated than I think it is, but Quicken for the Mac, not so good. Quicken for PC, pretty good. Now, the other thing I'll mention, I have an article on DoughRoller that lists other budgeting options. I'm going to put that in the Facebook group. I mentioned the Facebook group last week that I started. Had about 80 or 90 people join, very robust conversations about all kinds of things. It was actually a lot of fun. I made it a little easier for you to get to it. So if you haven't joined yet, you can go to DoughRoller.net /Facebook group, all one word. That will redirect you to the group. It's called DoughRollers. I'm looking at it now. We talked about dollar cost averaging versus lump sum investing. I dropped a link to a Vanguard article on that. We talked about the new Myra account and the best place to put an emergency fund, and a lot of robust conversation in the group about that and other places to put your emergency fund. We talked about DRIPs, direct reinvestment, direct stock purchase plans. DRIPs is the acronym. And I dropped a link to the dripinvestor.com, which is a good resource on DRIPs. We talked about this issue of connectivity between banks and site and tools like mint.com. Talked about FICO scores. A lot of interesting conversation. So I will drop a link to the article that lists additional budgeting tools in the Facebook group today, and you can check it out there. Again, you can check out the Facebook group and join it, DoughRoller.net /Facebook group, one word, and that will take you to DoughRollers, plural, that's what I call it, for better or worse. Okay, so the first thing is you need to know where your money's going, and you need to budget it. You don't have to use those. You could use a spreadsheet if you want to. And I've talked in the past about a 3-category budget where you just track the 3 categories that get you into trouble, whether it's eating out, buying electronics, whatever. There's ways to simplify the budgeting process. However you do it, if you're in debt because you're spending more than you make, then you got to get control over that. I don't know how else to do it other than to budget in some way. Now, the second thing I'll say on budgeting is if you are able to reduce your spending and you have extra money that you want to put towards, in this case, debt. For some of you, you might not have debt and you want to put it towards investing. The one thing I'll say is make sure you pull that savings out of your monthly budget and put it towards that debt. If you need to, do it as soon as you get paid. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is that extra savings is just going to get spent somewhere else. I like to get the money out of my hands as quickly as I can and to the place where I need it to go as quickly as possible. Whether that's paying off debt, investing it, whatever. When it's in my hands, I can do dumb things with it. But when I put it in the right spot, put it to work in the right place, then it's done. The second thing about staying out of debt and not going into more debt is there's a planning element to this. You can do all the right things. You can stop going into monthly debt. You can start tackling your credit card debt, whatever. And then what happens when your car dies and you need a new car? Even if you're willing to buy a really inexpensive car, are you going to have to go into debt to do it? Well, the answer is yes, if you haven't been saving for it. Now this gets to a question of, should you save for a future car or use that money to pay off 20% interest credit cards, and then if your car does die, you'll deal with it then. That's actually not necessarily a bad approach, and we'll talk about that in step 4. But one of the things that I now do is we set aside money for a car, so you need to kind of look long term. What other items am I going to need to spend on over the next 1 to 3 years, let's say, and should I be saving for it now, even while I'm also trying to get out of debt and tackle all kinds of other financial priorities? If you're in that category, the one thing I would recommend, what we do, is we opened up an online savings account, at an online bank because our interest rates are better. It also helps me. It takes the money out of the checking account or out of the savings account linked to my checking account that has easy access, moves it to a separate bank. I use Ally, but there are other good ones. I also use Capital One 360, but Ally is our main online bank. But it separates it. It gets it into a separate category, separate account, and the interest rates aren't great, but they're certainly better than the brick and mortar banks. I think I earn about 1% on my savings account at Ally. So if you're saving for future expenses so that you don't have to borrow money when the expenses come due, I would highly recommend an online savings account to get it out of your checking account and get it out of your linked savings account at your main bank. I think it just helps planning. It helps kind of keep track of it, and you earn a little bit more in interest. All right, step 2 is getting rid of debt. No real tools here to talk about or resources, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not a step you should skip. If you can sell a car that you don't need and get out of that debt, it's going to really supercharge your getting out of debt, both in terms of the interest you pay and the time it takes. Obviously, this won't apply to everyone. I get that, but it's not a step you should skip. Again, not resources for that, but an important step. All right, step 3, refinancing debt. A number of different tools here. So the first thing is your credit. If you're going to refinance your debt, particularly if you want to get really low rates, you've got to have good credit. Now, this may be something that you're working on. It may not. You may have struggled in this area, and it may be that improving your credit will take some time. That's fine. The resources. There's a couple of resources that I recommend here. The first is, I call them the big 3: Quizzle, Credit Karma, Credit Sesame. These are all free. They do not give you your FICO score, which some people get hung up on. They give you what they call an educational score, which is just a non-FICO score. All that means is the score is calculated using some kind of model other than the one that FICO devised. For generally improving your credit, it doesn't matter. The scores they give you are roughly equivalent to FICO. They're free, but more importantly, they do a great job of telling you why your credit score is where it is and the things that you need to do to improve it. So at a minimum, I would sign up for those, and you can track your credit score over time. You can hopefully see things improving. So that's the first resource: Quizzle, Credit Karma, Credit Sesame. You can sign up for all 3 if you want. I have, but certainly even just one of them will help. Now, another resource is your existing credit cards. Many credit card companies now give you free access to your official FICO score. And in fact, I wrote a post for my column in Forbes this past week was on this very issue, how to get free access to your FICO score. I actually dropped a link to that article in the Facebook group. So if you join the Facebook group, you'll see the link. But they give you access to your FICO score. There's a number of credit cards that do it. I'm looking through it now. Citibank does. Chase does if you have the Chase Slate card. American Express gives you access to it. Discover does. The interesting thing about that, by the way, if you have multiple cards like I do, none of the cards give me the same score. They're all quote-unquote FICO scores, but they're all different. And the range was difference ranged from a low of, I think, 799 to a high of 830 for me. 31 points, maybe not a huge difference. Well, if you're applying for a mortgage, the range between 799 and 830 wouldn't matter. But if your range were, say, 680 to 711, it would matter. Big difference. And the reason for that is they pull from different credit bureaus, which have slightly different information on you. And just to make matters worse, there's multiple FICO formulas. There's not just one FICO formula. So that's one of the reasons I say the criticism of educational scores is a bit misguided, because the truth of the matter is the credit score that would be used if you were to, say, apply for a mortgage is probably going to be slightly different than any credit score you can get access to. And certainly it's going to be different if there's any time lapse between when you looked at your score and when you actually applied for the mortgage. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. The real thing is these tools can help you understand why your score is what it is and how to improve it. And that's true with these credit card issuers as well. They will give you the two most important factors currently affecting your credit score. So another tool to consider. And again, all of these are free. So you can't beat free. So that's the first sort of group of tools when it comes to refinancing your debt to lower rates. The second group of tools would be zero balance transfer credit cards. My wife and I use these. We rolled over from one to another for a number of years until we paid off our debt. We even transferred some non-credit card debt to credit cards when we had the opportunity. They would send us a check, and we would use the check to pay off, I think it was our home equity line of credit at the time, to 0% balance transfer credit cards. Now, some do that, some don't. You have to ask them. But a couple of things to keep in mind on zero balance transfer cards. One, you really need good credit. So it goes back to credit. You need good credit to qualify for these. That's number one. Again, what's good credit? Well, I would say high 600s is probably the lowest, and low 700s would be more likely. Obviously, if you're above that, you shouldn't have a problem qualifying, at least from the credit score perspective. That's the first thing. The second thing is the longest 0% balance transfer available today is 21 months. Citibank has a number of those. Capital One, I think, has some that are that long. There are several at 18 months. I think Discover is at 18 months. And then so that's the second thing. The third thing is, with one exception, which I'll mention in a minute, they all have balance transfer fees. They're typically 3%. They have a minimum of like $5 or $10, but 3% of the amount transferred. Now, if you're transferring, credit card debt at 20%, obviously paying a 3% transfer fee is a no-brainer. Obviously, a very, very good deal to get the benefit of the 0%. The one that I'm aware of where there's no balance transfer fee is the Chase Slate card. They offer 0% for 15 months, no balance transfer fee if you initiate the transfer within 60 days of getting the card. So that's a great deal. Again, it's 15 months, not the longer, say 21 months that you can get from Citibank, but there's no balance transfer fee. So that'd be, for me, the Chase Slate's where I'd start. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, you can't transfer a balance from, say, for example, one Chase credit card to another Chase credit card, or one Citibank card to another Citibank card. They don't allow you to do that. You've got to go from one credit card company to another for the transfer. And so if you already have your balance on, say, the Chase Slate card and it's about to expire, you can't transfer it back to another Chase Slate card. You'd have to go to, again, Citi or Discover or Capital One or whatever. So something to keep in mind. Again, I'm going to put a lot of links in the Facebook group today as I publish this podcast. I'll include a link to the page on my site that lists all of the top, I don't list all of them, but what I consider to be the top balance transfer credit card offers. Now, for other kinds of loans, for school loans, SoFi is one place, SOFI. I've interviewed folks from there before and written about it. A great place to try to refinance your student loans. It's not the only option. There are others. SoFi can be a little tough because you really have to have good credit and good income to refinance your student loans. But it's at least a place to start. One thing to keep in mind, you cannot refinance a federal student loan with another federal student loan. You can consolidate your federal loans into one loan, but that doesn't actually lower your interest rate. They take a weighted average of your interest rate from the loans that you consolidate. If you want to refinance any student loan, it's got to be and by refinance, I mean to lower your interest rate. It's got to be a private loan. And for some folks, you may not want that because you may want to take advantage of the repayment plans that are available with federal student loans. So you need to understand that before you make this decision. But if you ultimately decide you want to refinance a student loan, that new loan that you'll get will be from a private lender. It won't be a government-backed loan. SoFi, again, I think is a good place to start. I will drop links into the Facebook group with some articles that give you other options as well. Then finally, you may have just other debt that you want to refinance. It could be a car loan, which you might be able to refinance through your bank, maybe personal loans, whatever. There are a number of other sources online. We've talked about P2P lending, peer-to-peer, person-to-person lending, like Lending Club and Prosper. Again, they can be good deals. You're obviously not going to get 0% like a balance transfer credit card, but if you have excellent credit, you could get a single-digit interest rate. But if you don't, it quickly goes up and it may not be worth it. So it's something that you're going to have to evaluate. But there are other options there. What I want to stress, though, is that refinancing your debt, if you can do it, is huge when it comes to getting out of debt. And it does two things. The obvious thing is you pay less in interest, right? And so you save money. Money, by the way, that you can, if you choose, put back into paying your debt off, right? The other thing is it helps you get out of debt faster, right? It's going to take you longer the higher your interest rate is. So all other things being equal. So with your lower interest rate, it lowers your payments typically. Or if it doesn't, it just means more of your money is going towards the balance rather than to interest. And so gets you out of debt faster. So those are a number of resources for refinancing your debt. Then the last thing is once you've done all that, you understand why you're in debt, you've made changes so you don't go into more debt, you've gotten rid of any debt that you can, you've refinanced your debt as best you can, you're tracking your credit score, you're doing all of those things. Then the question is, how do you actually set up the plan itself? And there's two questions here. The one is, of course, you're going to make your minimum payments, right? But there's two questions. One is, do you take and do you make additional payments beyond the minimum to your debt? That's question one. Don't assume that you should. That's question one. Question two is, if you're going to, which debt do you tackle first? So let's talk about question one. I don't believe that just as a rule of thumb, everyone should make getting out of debt their number one priority. I know there are some that say, yeah, if you've got debt, you should ignore all of your other financial goals. Don't save for retirement. Don't put money in a 401k. Don't, other than maybe a small emergency fund, don't save for emergencies. Don't save to buy a home. Debt, just tackle your debt. I think that's generally pretty poor advice. Almost all rules of thumb, if you say apply the rule of thumb always, is bad advice. And in fact, my wife and I didn't follow that advice. If you are able to refinance your debt, maybe you've got credit card debt, but it's at 0%, and you've got student loans at 5 or 6%. Should you forego a company match at your employer's 401k? My goodness, absolutely not. And if it's going to take you 20 years to get out of debt because you've got $150,000 in school loans, should you not buy a home? Should you wait until you're 50 to buy a home? I think that's absurd if buying a home is important to you. So this question, should you apply extra money to your debt, is, I think, something that's a little more nuanced than others suggest. If you've got debt that, say, I'll just try to draw a line in the sand, but again, we could always argue with numbers, 8% or less. I probably would not be putting all of my extra dollars towards that debt, particularly if I've got 0% on credit cards through balance transfers, and maybe low-rate school loans, or maybe a low-rate auto loan. It's not to say I wouldn't put some money towards the debt. I might, but I would be likely maxing out my retirement accounts first. And that's true even if I didn't have a company match. And here's why. The 401k limit this year, 2015, for those that are under 50, is $18,000. Now, of course, there's an IRA limit as well that's much lower, but let's just focus on a 401k for a moment. I can put aside $18,000 this year. If I don't do that, if I don't put anything aside or something less than $18,000, come 2016, I can never go back and put more money into my 2015 401k. If I put $10,000 in and 2016 comes along and I've got some extra money, I can't just say, hey, let me tuck another $8,000 into that 401k for 2015. I can't do that, right? Now, with an IRA, you can make the contributions for 2015 up until you file your taxes in 2016. But once the deadline passes, you can't go back and put more money. You lose forever the opportunity to max out your retirement accounts each year. You lose that opportunity, whether with a 401k, it's at 12/31. With an IRA, it's when you file your taxes, when your taxes are due. But whatever the deadline is, when it passes, it's done. You can't go back and add to it. And you lose that opportunity forever. And I think that's something to really think about. It's a pretty significant opportunity that you have lost. Why? So you can put all your extra money on a school loan at 5%, or a 0% balance transfer card. That's even more insane. So really think about this question. Should you be putting extra dollars towards your debt? Now, if you're struggling, you've got maybe poor credit, and you've got credit card debt at 25%. Well, that's a different story. That's why rules of thumb, while they might be a good starting point, don't ever turn your brain off and just do something because it's a rule of thumb or because someone, including myself, by the way, thinks it's the good thing to do. You got to think for yourselves. You got to analyze your own specific situation and make the best choice for you. So that's question one. Should you put extra money towards debt? If you decide to, then there's always this pesky question of, well, which debt should you tackle first? The lowest one, the one with the lowest balance, or the one with the highest interest rate? Or I would add, should you think about revolving credit versus installment loans? A great tool, I've mentioned it before, but I mention it because it's just, I think, the best. Online calculator, it's free. It's called unbury.me. unbury.me. It's a simple online calculator. You put in all your debts, you hit the button, and it tells you, here's what it'll look like if you apply your extra money towards the debt with the lowest balances. Here's how long it'll take you to get out of debt. Here's how much interest you'll pay. And then they'll show you the same analysis if you tackle the highest interest debt first. Now, for some of you, the difference won't be significant. For others, it could be huge. It just depends on your debt. It's interesting. The theory about paying the smallest balance first is that you pay off this small debt. It's kind of a shot in the arm. It gets you motivated. I think there's some truth to that. And if you've got a debt that's going to take you 4 or 5 months to pay off, one, doing it might do just that, help keep you motivated. And two, because it's such a quick debt to pay off, the fact that you might have other high interest rate debt is probably not going to make a huge difference because you're able to pay that small debt off so quickly. Again, a tool like unbury.me will confirm that for you. But if it's 3, 4, 5 months to pay the smallest debt off, probably no big deal. On the other hand, if it's going to take you 10 years to pay off your smallest debt, one, it could make a huge difference paying it off first. It could hurt you if you have other high interest rate debt. But secondly, it's probably not going to be that motivational. I mean, it's one thing to get rid of a debt in 3 or 4 months that you feel good, but 10 years, probably not the low hanging fruit, the quick win that people talk about. So again, start with unbury.me and go from there. It's a great tool. It's free, and it will help you figure out the best debt repayment plan given your circumstances and your goals in life. Now, 3 books I want to recommend, and they're all very different, but I think they will help you. I think this is good for folks, not just who are in debt, but that just kind of want, these are sort of foundational books in my view. The first one is Total Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey. He has his own sort of set approach to how you should do this. Follow that if you think it's best for you. Don't follow it if you don't. I got a lot of motivation from Dave when I was getting out of debt, but I didn't follow his, I think he calls them baby steps, because they just weren't right for me. But I think his book is very good, particularly for those just, trying to get their arms around their finances. I think it's a great place to start. Second one is Your Money or Your Life. This book does a great job of putting into perspective exactly where your finances are and money versus living the life that you want to live. It really is a great book. Now, I will warn you, the topics on investing in this book are terrible. Skip them. Don't even read them. Rip them out and burn them. Horrible. But everything else in this book, great. Your Money or Your Life. The last one is, many of you have probably heard of all these books, but the last one, this may surprise some folks, is The Millionaire Next Door. This book talks about what millionaires really look like. They're not the ones on the cover of the magazines. Yes, they have millionaires on the cover of magazines, but when you think about a millionaire, you may think about someone glitzy and glamorous and driving $150,000 cars and all this sort of thing. The typical millionaire does not fit that mold at all. And if you've not read this book, it's worth reading. And the reason you say, well, that's fine. Millionaire Next Door tells us what millionaires are really like, but what's that got to do with getting out of debt? I think the book can be highly motivational because it tells you a couple things. That one, millionaires are, for the most part, not different than the general population. They do make some decisions a little differently, which you'll read about in the book. But the fact of the matter is, just someone making $50,000, $75,000 a year can become a millionaire, and that seems impossible, but it's not. Now, obviously, some millionaires, they might be worth $10 million or more. That's going to be certainly well beyond the average. But the millionaires, the folks that worked for their money, they didn't inherit it, they didn't win it in the lottery. The average millionaire is a pretty down-to-earth person who drives an older car and has lived in the same house for a very long time, and saves and invests their money. And so I find that book can be an inspiration, very motivational. And you need that when you're climbing out of debt, because particularly if you're in really bad shape, there are going to be times when you struggle, and you should expect that. That's just the way it is. And The Millionaire Next Door, I think, can be a great inspiration. So I highly recommend it. Now, I have a longer article on this topic about resources for getting out of debt and ideas for getting out of debt. I will link to that along with all of these other resources in the Facebook group. So again, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group. Dan, great question. Appreciate it. Hopefully some of the tools I've mentioned will help you. Again, check out the Facebook group for more. And by the way, when you join the Facebook group, if you have other books you recommend, other tools, other resources, please drop a link to it in the Facebook group, because that's really the purpose of the group, so we can all benefit from our collective wisdom. So now on to a couple of news items I wanted to share with you today. One was from the Wall Street Journal. It said, Fed hike seen next month as growth hurdles fade. So there's all this talk about when the Fed is going to raise the rates, what's going to happen when they do. Of course, presumably they're only going to raise them if they do a quarter point, I'm guessing. So one could say, well, yeah, I guess it's news because they haven't raised the rate in almost a decade. But still rock bottom by historical standards. And, what's the big deal? And maybe there won't be a big deal. I guess we'll see. Again, I'm not very good at predicting these sorts of things. But I wanted to share with you some historical numbers, some things that I found, and with interest rates. And here's why. We all know the market can go down, it can go up. Bad things can happen in the financial markets. But, we've had a relatively easy time of it over the last few years. We came out of the crisis in 08, 09. That was obviously very difficult. But unemployment's come back down. Participation rate's not great, but unemployment's come back down. The market's done generally well. Interest rates are low, bad for savers, but good for mortgages and whatnot. And while we know that we can enter another financial crisis, we know history, we know this happens. I think we kind of get lulled into this notion of this feeling that it's not going to happen. Intellectually, our minds tell us it can and it will, but I'm not so sure our hearts really believe it. And so when it happens, it's always a shock to the system. And it's a shock to the system, I think, because, while we know it can happen, we don't know when. We also don't know what will trigger it, but I think we can get very used to and comfortable to the status quo. The status quo right now is a low interest rate environment. And I think we need to be as prepared for a higher interest rate environment, at least mentally. I'm not suggesting we necessarily make changes to our investments, but mentally we need to be prepared for it. And so as I was going through, I mentioned I found that newsletter in my stepmother's paper. So I was going through some of my own papers. I wanted to read you a couple of things. This is from the Columbus Citizen Journal, which is a paper that doesn't exist anymore. From January 7th, 1981. I cut the article out. I don't even know why I had this newspaper. From 1981, January 7th. Listen to this headline. Big New York bank cuts the prime rate to, are you ready for this? 19.5%. They cut it to 19.5%. Chemical Bank, at that time the nation's sixth largest, made the move to 19.5% from 20.5%. The same paper, the same day, headline, Dow breaks 1,000 mark with late buying outburst. I like that. You know what the outburst was? It went up 12 points. We forget those days, right? We can't even imagine. Well, some of us can, I can. The older listeners among us can imagine, but even we really probably can't. We really can't imagine. We remember it happening. Prime rates at 20%, mortgages, 15%. We remember it. I remember it. But can we really feel it? I'm not so sure. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that, interest rates are going to go back up to a prime of 20%, although they could. I don't know when. I wouldn't assume it's going to happen quickly. We are certainly at an historically low point in our history in terms of interest rates, and 1981 was a high point. But things do change. And, I was looking through that and I found something else. I had a certificate of deposit. I don't know why I have this stuff. I had a certificate of deposit in 1981. I was 15 at the time. And I found the notice. It was from the Huntington National Bank, which I don't think exists. It was a money market certificate of deposit dated February 22nd, 1981, an 8-month CD. You know what my interest rate was? 13.861%. Man, I'd like to have that back. Although I wouldn't want the prime rate at 20, but I'd like to have a CD at 13.861%. It gets better. A few months later, August 29th, 1981, the interest rate jumped on my CD to 16.045%. Unbelievable. Well, there you go. I mean, the point I'm trying to make, interest rates are low. They're probably going to go up in December, maybe. I've been predicting, along with Porter Stansberry apparently, since 2010 that they were going to go up. Eventually we'll be right. Remember what they say about economists: predict what or when, but never both. But we should at least be prepared mentally for bad things to happen in the market, and we should understand what we will do with our investments, if anything, if they do. For example, I invest a lot in index funds. I know a lot of you do. How would you feel if for 5 years running, 75% of actively managed funds clobbered index funds? Would you still be so bullish on index funds? Would you still love Vanguard? Would you stop listening to this podcast? Seriously, it's not just enough to make certain investments. You need to know why you're doing it. You have to have confidence in what you're doing and recognize that a good investment will sometimes perform poorly. Do you know that Berkshire Hathaway stock, one of the best investments of all time, has dropped by 50% or more in value, I think 3 different times? Would you have stayed in that stock if you were a Berkshire investor? If you had, you'd be quite wealthy today if you'd been investing in Berkshire for decades. But you would have had to have weathered some very serious storms, even with such a great company and such a great investor as Warren Buffett. Anyway, I think understanding that history and not forgetting it is helpful as we move forward. Okay, next item. I mentioned this briefly, and we talked about it in the Facebook group, but a number of banks, Chase is one, Bank of America is another, they've been cutting off the link between their customers' data and sites like mint.com is the big one. I haven't heard it so much about Personal Capital, but maybe it's happened there too, where they won't allow you to download your data into these account aggregators. And there's different reasons for it. There's some that the banks say that it's putting a load on their servers. Some pundits say no, they just don't like the competition from these account aggregators. I don't know where the truth lies, but the reality is this is happening. It seems to cut off for a few days, and then folks at Mint or whatever, work it out with the bank and they turn it back on. I've not seen this so much with aggregating investment accounts through, say, a site like Personal Capital. What I've seen so far is it's been banks. I've heard of Bank of America, Chase, I think Synchrony. It's primarily been the aggregation of banking data. But it's a story that I'll keep my eye on, and we've been talking about it in the Facebook group. If you use an account aggregator, you may have encountered these issues. If you had and you joined the Facebook group, let us know about them, because we're just kind of trying to understand and to see where this story goes and which financial institutions it impacts. Next item, very quickly, there was an article about how hackers, it's called hacker ransoms, where they will, maybe through a file in an email that you open that you shouldn't, they will take control of your computer, lock you out of it, encrypt it, and then charge you a ransom, a few $100, a few $1,000 or whatever, if you want access to your computer back. That's scary. The reason I mention this is it's so important to back up your data, whether you back it up to the cloud, you back it up to Dropbox, you back it up to a hard drive. I've got an external hard drive on my computer that I back it up to. Plus, I back up online to a lot of important stuff. But you definitely take that precaution. Obviously, you want to have software that can help you detect viruses. We all know it's not perfect. I guess the hackers come up with new stuff all the time, and I think the software companies do their best to keep up. But it's certainly not a guarantee. But you want to use it, but make sure your data is backed up. Because, and this is just for one reason, but this hacker ransom seems to be a big thing in the news lately, and it's happening, I guess, with more frequency. Obviously, the FBI is involved in looking at it, but you want to protect yourself. The last news item I'll mention before we get to one reader question and then the questions for the week is this is for you accounting nerds, which I include myself in that. Rules shift gains to put leases on balance sheets. This is an interesting issue, at least if you evaluate financial statements. And it's an issue that I'm tracking. And it deals with the Financial Accounting Standards Board and how you account for leases. If you think about a mortgage, just like your own home, or if you're a company, you buy a building and you get a mortgage and you finance 100% of it, what's that look like on your balance sheet? Well, the building is an asset. So that goes in your balance sheet as an asset. And the loan is a liability. So it's a liability on your balance sheet. So what some companies will do is say, well, wait a minute, I don't really like that liability on my balance sheet. I'm going to sell the building that we own. I'll get some cash, and it'll take the building off my balance sheet, but it'll take the liability off my balance sheet as well. It'll show the company with less debt, and then I'll rent the building. We're not going to move. Nothing's going to change. We're just going to sign a few pieces of paper, and it's business as usual, and we'll just lease the building. Well, there are rules already in GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Principles, about how that transaction should be accounted for. And is it really a lease, or should it be accounted for as if you really own the building, if it's a long-term lease, if you lease it for 50 years, let's say. Well, they're considering making additional changes to those rules that would treat leases more commonly as if you owned the building. And it's something, if you evaluate individual companies, it's important to try to understand as best as their financial disclosures will allow how they treat their real estate and what its true fair market value is, which could be very different than what's reported on their balance sheet. And if they're leasing, what are the lease agreements? What are the lease terms? Is it effectively a liability, even though it may not show up on their books as a liability? And so if this is something you follow, and I know this may not apply to most of you, but it's something that I follow both as an investor, but also because my legal practice deals with defending accountants. It's just something I keep tabs on. So if it's something that's important to you, it's something definitely to check out. Financial Accounting Standards Board looking at possible changes to lease accounting. All right. On to one listener question. I actually had three I was going to read, but I'm gonna stick to just one, and I'll pick up the other two next week. It's from a listener named Russell. He says, I have several categories of questions to ask you, but for now I will keep it to a budgeting question. I am a novice in personal finance matters, but your podcasts have helped me very much. I recently got married and realized that I will have to handle the financing and budgeting for myself and my wife, at least at a high level. We have decided to have 2 separate individual bank accounts where the other person will not have direct access, and a joint account from which we will do most of our spending, particularly for all household common expenses. Ideally, I would like to have a separate budget account for myself and another for my family as a whole. I recently started using Mint.com, but it seems that Mint does not allow one to have multiple accounts or seamlessly combine individual accounts. I am looking for a tool that will allow me to filter and selectively track budgeting from different combinations of bank accounts, credit cards, etc. Do you know of an online budgeting tool that does this? I know your favorite budget tool is YNAB, which I actually have not yet tried, but before I buy the service, I wanted to get your opinion on this, as well as any tips you might have for budgeting for oneself and the family as a whole. Thank you so much for your input. Thought the question was perfect given today's main topic. A couple of thoughts. I'm not a big fan of married couples having separate accounts, particularly separate accounts that the other doesn't have access to. I think probably studies show that that's more common in second marriages. But my wife and I, we have just, joint accounts. That's all we have. I don't like separate accounts for a lot of different reasons. But one of it is I just kind of feel like whatever I've got is hers and whatever she's got is mine. And maybe that's just an old-fashioned traditional view of marriage. If that's it, I will plead guilty. I'm not a fan of separate accounts. That's not to say you can't have some separate money, spending money or whatever. And maybe that's what Russell has in mind. I don't know. I guess you could take my way of thinking to an extreme. I'm not looking over my wife's shoulder every time she spends a nickel, and she's not doing that with me. So, certainly there's room for a lot of, individuality, I guess, and whatnot, but I'm just not a big fan of separate accounts. One of the reasons is kind of the point that Russell's bringing up, and that is it's an administrative headache. It's just more work. That being said, if that's, obviously we make our own decisions, and if that's something you want to do, there is a way to do it, at least that I'm aware of, and some of you may have better ideas, but it's to simply open multiple accounts. So for example, with Mint.com, just open 2 accounts with different emails and link different accounts to each one. So you could link, your family accounts to one, and for the other one, just your own accounts. If you're going to have maybe an individual bank account that you want to budget. Again, it's 2 logins, it's 2 things to deal with. That's sort of the one of the downsides to having separate accounts, but it would certainly get the job done. With YNAB, you can create multiple budgets. You don't have to have just one. So you could create something called the family budget, and then I guess he could create something called the Russell budget or whatever, and choose which accounts to be part of that budget. And if he has a separate bank account for his own spending, separate and apart from, say, the family spending, you could link each account to the correct budget within YNAB, and there you go. So you can have multiple budgets in YNAB as well. So that's how you could do it. Again, it's a little more administrative work, and but it gets the job done. So hope that helps, Russell. And that's again, at least the way I know to do it. Folks out there, if you have better ways, join the Facebook group and let us know about them. Okay. Question of the week. So last week, the question was calculate your expense ratio. Got a lot of great responses. We have 4 winners of the $25 Amazon gift cards. Sean, Mahir, hope I'm pronouncing that right, Mike, and Mike, 2 Mikes. So they don't even know yet, at least as I'm recording this podcast. I'm going to email them as soon as I get done with this show. And in the Facebook group, someone asked me if I would share, just kind of get a flavor of the expense ratios that were coming in. And let me just run through some of them. I'll just go quickly. 4 bips, 4 basis points. That's pretty good. They have all their money in VINIX. That's Michael, which is I think that's a Vanguard S&P 500 institutional fund. I think. In the event, 4 basis points, not bad. We've got one. This was one of my favorites. 7.5628 basis points. That's very, very specific. 0.02. This has got to be a TSP, I think. But very low, maybe not. In the event, 0.2 basis points, very low. They use personal capital to track their expense ratio. And by the way, someone emailed me and said, how do you get your expense ratio out of personal capital? That's a great question. So if you have a personal capital account and you go in, and now I'm looking for it, here it is, and they've logged me out. Hang on, I'm going to log back in. It's called a 401k analyzer. And I know it sounds like that would only work with a 401k, but you can actually select which accounts to include in the analyzer. And the great thing about this tool is not only does it tell you your average expense ratio, your weighted average, which for me is 31 basis points for just my 401k. Overall, my expense ratio is much lower, but for just my 401k, which I'm looking at the moment, it's 31 basis points. It shows you that. Shows you the individual expense ratios for all your investments. So I'm looking at, I've got a Vanguard total bond fund in my 401k, 7 basis points. I have Dodge & Cox International Stock Fund, DODFX, 64 basis points. But based on how much money I have in each, it comes out to a weighted average of 31 basis points. But it also shows you, and this is, I think, one of the great things about personal capital, it shows you how those fees will affect your earnings over a long period of time, in my case, up to age 65. So it's going to, and it goes up. The longer you invest at those expense ratios, the more it takes through compounding. And it calculates that I'll lose 6% of earnings to fees. Of course, that's with 31 basis points. Imagine if you're paying 70 basis points and you're paying an advisor 1.5% to stick your money in mutual funds. It's going to wallop you. But in any event, personal capital, that's how you do it. So again, you go to advisor tools and then down to 401k fee analyzer. Let's see, what else do we have? Some people actually listed out all of their investments, which was great, and the expense ratio and whatnot. Here's someone at 29.1 bips. Here's someone at just under 1%, 0.993 bips. In this case, I think a lot of it has to do with their 401k. Sean, who's one of the winners of the Amazon gift card, which, by the way, was picked at random, right? There's no right or wrong answer to the question. He's at just over 8 bips. Here was at 20. Mike was at 29. Generally pretty low. Here's someone at 14.6 bips, 18 basis points, which Richard described as disappointing. I like that. I like the way you think. 65 basis points. Most of them were relatively low. So that kind of gives you an idea. And a lot of them, I found a couple of things. One of them, they were relatively low. Here's someone at 40 basis points. They were low, and to the extent that they were higher than the person emailing me wanted them to be, it was because of the 401k, which is sad. And I hope that improves over time as more and more 401ks offer low cost investing. So that kind of gives you a flavor. Here's one at 5 basis points. A lot of really low expense ratios, which I was happy to see. Hopefully, even if you didn't email me, I'm really interested in those people that had no idea what their costs were and went and calculated it. And I got some of those emails. Folks, said, "Yeah, I'd never done this before." I was surprised, either for the good or the bad. And it makes a huge difference. It amazes me. We'll drive out of our way to save 5 cents a gallon of gas. And I do that. My wife and I, we can tell you exactly where the low-cost gas stations are around our house. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do that. But, we do those sorts of things, and we get upset if we spend $5 for a mocha at Starbucks, but then we have absolutely no idea what our investments are costing us, and that we could be burning 5, even 6 figures worth of wealth over a lifetime of investing. And so if you didn't do this, please do. Obviously, the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway is over, but that's really not the point, right? The point is to help you keep as much of your wealth, your hard-earned money, as you can. So if you haven't calculated your expense ratio, please do. It's easy to do. In fact, I may write an article just on how to do it and the tools you can use to do it, because it's that important. Okay, next week, I liked this question of the week because it forces you to do something. It's like forcing you to eat your broccoli. I mean, it may not be the most fun for everybody, but it's good for you. So this week, I'm going to kind of do the same thing. And the question this week, or the task, if you will, is to calculate your net worth. Now, you don't have to send it to me. You can if you want. I'm obviously not going to share it with anyone, but you don't have to. To enter the contest for the $25 Amazon gift card, again, I'm going to give away 4. Just email me and tell me you did it. That's fine. If you want to give me the number, that's fine too. Doesn't matter. What I'm interested in is that you actually do it, because your net worth is the scorecard. Your net worth is the result of all of your financial decisions. Your income, your budgeting, your spending, your investing. It's the scoreboard. It shows you the progress you've made or the ground that you've lost. And so, it's really important not just to know it today, but to track it. I track mine. And I track it throughout the year, and then on 12/31 I lock it down. I say, okay, that's my net worth for 12/31/2014, 12/31 here coming up soon, 2015, and I can look at my progress and I can see it, and I can understand why. Maybe the market went down or the market went up, or I had a big expense that year, or I saved more than I normally do. Whatever, good, bad. It really is the way in which you ought to track your financial progress. Yes, we look at other things. You look at your income, you look at your debt, your monthly budget, all important, but all the sum total of all of that work shows up in your balance sheet, right? It shows up in your net worth. If you spend more than you make in a given month or a given year, that gets reflected in your balance sheet, right? Your net worth statement. How? Well, how did you spend more than you made? You either took money out of savings or you borrowed. So it's either going to show through a decrease in your assets or an increase in your liabilities, right? It's the only two options. If you made more than you spent, or put it differently, you spent less than you made, you had that extra cash, it too is going to show up in your balance sheet somewhere. You're going to put the money in a savings account. It's going to show up as cash. You're going to direct that money to an IRA. It's going to show up in your investment accounts on your balance sheet as an asset. You took the extra money and paid down your car loan, so it's going to reduce a liability on your balance sheet. Everything that we do, from budgeting, trying to get a good job, making money, career, saving money on, car insurance, right? I mean, improving your credit score so you pay less on a mortgage. All these little tiny things, well, they're not all little, but from big to small, all of these sort of daily decisions that we make ultimately show up on your balance sheet, your net worth statement. So it's really important to track it, so that's what I'd like you to do this week. Maybe some of you already do, and you can just shoot me an email, say, I track my net worth. That's all you got to do. If you want to give me your number, you can, you don't have to. But it's that important. I really want you to do it, and I'm willing to give away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Again, I'll just do a random selection. So, this is getting published today on Monday, November 16th, 2015, and I'll pick a winner this Saturday. So please get those in, and thank you for everyone that's participated so far. And again, don't forget about the Facebook group, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group. We'll redirect you to the Facebook group. And been a great lively discussion this week. I'm going to post all of the links that I mentioned and resources I mentioned in today's podcast to the Facebook group, so you can check them out. And there you go. Hey, hope you have a great week. And until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.